I'm going to go ahead and introduce our moderator for today. Also works at Heroku doing Ember JS. He's a staple within the DC Tech community. He has a background in psychology and software development. Effervescent Casey Watts.
Hi everyone, so glad to be here. I am Casey. I say that at every meeting, it never gets old. Sometimes it's useful. Okay, so I'm going to go through, I'm the moderator for this panel. I'm going to try not to talk about myself as much as I can and let the panelists discuss their experience. Before we start, I'm kind of curious, if you're comfortable sharing, who in this room, I love mics, who in this room is queer? If you're queer, raise your hand. Cool. If you're not, you're here as an ally. Thank you so much. I love having allies around. Woo! Even as a queer person in tech, my experience is very limited. I only know my own, so it's awesome about to hear all these stories I've never heard, probably. This is great. For the structure of this, first we're going to do introductions, like 30 seconds for each of us, something like that. And then I'm going to ask the audience for questions. I'm going to record some of them. I have some ready. Probably some will overlap. That's pretty cool. And then we'll go through and we'll ask questions and go through the panel. All right, so hi, I'm Casey. I work at Heroku. I do Ember stuff. I host meetups. I think you figured that part out. What else do I know? Oh, queerness. Oh, when you introduce yourself, I'd love it if you could define the word queer. We all have our own definition, I think. I like the word queer. I think it's like an umbrella term lately. I think originally maybe it wasn't, I don't know historically, but lately it's an umbrella term. It means like anyone LGBTQ, but it's shorter, fewer syllables, and it's just really useful. Like anyone who has anything that's not normal about themselves can be, like sexuality or gender-wise, can be queer. I'm a gay man, and I don't mind telling anyone that, but I also don't bring it up sometimes. And we can say pronouns. I said I'm a man, but I also like he, him. That's what I said.
Oh man, this is a weird using mic. Okay, cool. So my name is Avi. I love rabbits, cheesecake, and cute things. I love the 7000 series Metro. Also using mic is really weird, turns out. Anyways, so I identify as just strictly queer. I love the word because it defines everything of who I am, but at the same time it also doesn't like give out specifics, which is also part of me because I don't really feel like I have a specific. So I feel like queer is just me, and I am queer too. My pronouns are also just Avi, he, him, or they, them. Don't remember anything. Oh, also the word queer. There is some issues still with it from historical context. So basically, for like late 30s and younger, you're probably fine with the word. If you're older, typically there are more contexts to it that weren't as great, but mostly been reclaimed publicly at this point. So socially, it is okay to use the word queer. So.
Something professional? What do you do professional?
Oh yeah, I'm currently, I guess, a full stack developer just working for fun, but I also really love security and cryptography and just stuff like that and breaking everything. Oops, and lockpicking. I love lockpicking, so I also, oh yeah, I really love lockpicking. So if you want to learn a lockpick tool, then it's just like awesome.
Hi, I'm Ninad. Yeah, my name's like the last one over there, so yeah. But that's okay. Yeah, the only reason I pointed that out was because since it's an unfamiliar name, like once you see it written down, it might be easier to remember. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I work as a tech support rep for an education company. What that is if they have trouble like uploading or downloading files, then they get in touch with me, and I tell them how to do that. So it's a little more complicated than telling them how to turn on and off their computer, but yeah, that's what I do. And I'm a gay person, and to me, queer means like anything that departs from the norm. So yes, it is an umbrella term. As for pronouns, I'm fine with anything. Like you can call me he, she, or even it. Like it sat here, and so on. That's about it.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Mark. I am a technical analyst here at Excella for a few Scrum teams. I'm a cis gay man. My pronouns are he and him. I guess queerness to me means just anything that's pretty much outside the walled garden of heteronormativity. Kind of like to live in that space and celebrate that. Typically not at work, so this is a little strange for me. But yeah, that's pretty much what it means to me.
Hello, I'm Katie. I am product manager at Booz Allen. I manage a cybersecurity product. I have a background as a computer scientist and mechanical engineer, so I actually studied robotics in college, but now do more of the people side of tech, which I enjoy a lot. I am a cis gay woman. I try to use lesbian when I can. I think it's a word that doesn't get a lot of love, but most of the time I prefer queer as well, just because I think some of you have touched on it, but what can you assume about me if I say queer? And I hope the answer is nothing. So it's just a fun way of saying I depart from the norm, all your assumptions are trash. So I think it's a great word to use.
Hello, my name is Adrian Gilliam. I am a front-end web developer at Booz Allen Hamilton, and also, I really don't like actually using microphones because I get all shaky and stuff. I am also on the board of our LGBT resource group called Globe, which I'll talk to you guys about in a little bit. The power of ERGs and what they can do within a corporate environment. What does queer mean to me? So, I think for me, queer is just an ability to bring your authentic self to whatever space that you're in, whether that be work, whether that be a competitor space like Excella Consulting, we love you guys, to a nonprofit organization, to a friend's house, to a family get-together, anything of that nature. I think queer is just that vehicle for you to just bring, what truly represents who you are, inside and outside. And it lets you be a little, I guess, fashionable in a way. I've yet to see a very not fashionably conscious queer person. I have yet. You're fashionable, buddy, don't worry.
Only today.
Yeah, I like the microphone because it makes sure only one person talks at a time. And we respect each other, but it's easy to over talk. Thanks. Next, I'm going to ask the audience. Do you guys have questions? Think about what do you expect to hear us talk about? What would you like to hear about? I'm going to collect some of yours. We're not going to ask them directly, but I'll put them into what I'm moderating. Any hands?
Don't be shy.
What were your assumptions when you walked your first day of work? How did you expect your queerness to affect your job, and has it?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Working on that question, also the year that you first felt that, because I think that's a lot different. I'm actually looking for my first tech job, and that's going to be a lot different today than it was 10 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, more questions?
How do you think that the tech landscape has changed in relation to when you first started and you came out to your coworkers and now? And where do you see it in the future?
Cool. Thank you.
Have you ever reported an incident related to your queerness to HR? And if not, have you ever hesitated and not done it, and why?
That's interesting. More questions? Like 3 more?
Microaggressions, is that something you experience? What is that, and how can other people in the room kind of help out with that?
Great question.
I suppose that more broadly speaking, what sort of ongoing challenges have you found in the tech workplace being queer?
To tag on to the question about microaggressions, not to dilute the topic, but do you feel like that is also an issue if you're, in addition to being queer, you're also a person of color or a woman or another minority?
Cool. Anyone else burning? I think that's good. All right, thank you. It's tempting to answer all the questions at once. I'm going to try to make our conversation threaded and choose one topic at a time for us all to discuss. If you want to add something like you would like to talk about this next, please tell me and we'll bump that up the stack. I want to point out queries in tech. I didn't get the pun right away. You guys see the pun?
Yeah.
Queries. I use ease as a suffix all the time. I don't even like difference. Good choice.
We were also, one was Queeries.
That's for the JavaScript of us.
But we didn't want to be, we want to be language agnostic here.
Right, I think I'd like to start with a current general question of how visible do you feel at work currently? We don't have to, we shouldn't probably go in order every time, but whoever wants to answer can take it.
You guys want to go first? Okay. So can you guys hear me all right? If I have my microphone here, perfect. So at Booz Allen, I think things are a little different because we are a major corporate entity, not just in the DC area, but nationally, right? So folks might feel that they're invisible because they're a number in about a 22,000 personnel-based organization. But I would find that assumption to be false, maybe after the first week or two that you've been at the company, and I can really only speak from the perspective of Booz Allen. We have employee resource groups like Globe and others that really ensure that employees who want to be known, who want to be made visible, who want to have opportunities to network with both senior leaders and junior staff members, it's there. It's there for them to take advantage of. Where it becomes difficult is for that employee who just comes in and is overwhelmed by all this new information that they're getting them, they don't take advantage of that. Or they don't know who to first reach out to and talk to get into that particular space. At least for me, that was my worry. Within my first 2 weeks, I was like, oh my goodness, this is my first big boy job. Like, how do I, where's the bathroom? Like, how do I turn my computer on? I was a web developer, so I shouldn't have even said that. But within the first 2 weeks, I decided to reach out and start to network and see some folks, and one of whom is actually a very good friend of ours, Joon Lao. Now, I won't go into specifics, but Joon Lao is somebody who you cannot forget because he's the only one who will walk into a workspace, client meeting, government facility in like 8-inch high heels, a fuchsia jacket, and a different colored hair every single day. You'll never forget him. But he is also the head of Globe, the employee resource group for LGBT employees. So right then and there, he's not invisible. Why? Because he's putting his queerness out. And you can see him, and you can know him, and you can remember him. And I think he taught me and many staff members, and hopefully here everyone in the room, that if you don't want to be invisible, and you want to find out opportunities, you have to make yourself known. Right? You have to, you don't have to, but it's always a good idea to just showcase what makes you different, what makes you unique, and that it gives you, I think, an easier opportunity for folks to reach out and help you. Even if it's small as wearing a pride pin on your jacket your first day.
I'm gonna jump off this because I also am at Booz Allen. So in my experience, it's actually a little different. I think being a gay woman is a little different than being maybe like what you think as a flamboyant. What does it mean by putting yourself out there? Do I have to wear plaid to work every day? Like I'm not, like what does visibility mean? So the way I do it, I have a rainbow lanyard that I wear with my Booz Allen ID on it. But I found it really challenging coming into Booz Allen, and particularly because Globe, which is a great space, and I've gone to a lot of events at, is predominantly male-dominated in a lot of ways. So there can be definite challenges, but in my experience, it has been really powerful and important to wear some sort of little token that I don't necessarily need to say it every time I walk into a room. Although you'd be amazed that people just really, they can't take a clue. Sometimes I make up having a girlfriend just so I can say it out loud and just get that out there. Just be like, yo, my girlfriend made this lunch, I made it, But in a way to out myself. If the conversation's going a weird direction, people talking about significant others, and I can just tell someone is gonna try to preempt the flub. So it's definitely interesting in the corporate space, and I think it's project to project and kind of organization to organization, but I definitely echo the bringing your whole self to work, but it is kind of one of those, you've got to take that first step, and it's got to be you, how you feel comfortable. And to wearing your queerness on your sleeve, I think is different for everyone.
I know we said that we weren't going to go in order, but
Yeah.
I want to go off of that. I worked first in Florida, which was kind of a much different environment from when I started working in DC. And it's kind of weird, just the environment, because in Florida, I never really felt comfortable being upfront about like the totality of who I am as a person. It's not that Florida is necessarily extremely hostile in terms of like homosexuality. It's really more of a problem when it came to my race. But when I moved up here, and especially when I started working for my current firm, it really was kind of natural. I mean, I just kind of felt different. You know, DC is like a very queer city, or at least my bubble is. So I just kind of never really, you know, took my face off when I came to work. And like Katie said about kind of outing yourself and putting yourself out there. I mean, we all know that coming out isn't just something that you have to do, you know, one time. You pretty much have to do it forever. But at Excella, I never really felt that I had to consciously be continually coming out to people. In fact, I think I might even be a little bit too comfortable here because in a meeting maybe a couple weeks ago, I referred to a male coworker like girl, that wasn't, stuff like that. So I do feel very visible at work, but it's not a bad thing. And in the past, it kind of has been. So that's one thing that's been nice.
Well, I work remotely. I work from home. So even if I were to wear a gay legal pin, no one's going to notice it. But yeah, before this, I used to work for a company which was not too big. It was like quite small, or at least at the office where I worked, there were like maybe about 24 people. And I found that all I had to do was come out to just 1 or 2 people. And then the news would spread like wildfire. Yeah. So it would take care of it on its own. But many years ago, like things were different. Like I used to hesitate before coming out at work because society as a whole was not as accepting as it is today. So I had to think twice. And once when I came out to a coworker, he was like, "Oh, thanks for coming out, but just make sure you don't tell anyone else." I was like, "Okay." Of course, I did not follow his advice. That's another matter. So yeah, that to you.
I think I'm pretty visibly queer at this point. But at one point when I first came out, actually, like I officially came out and I started transitioning physically with testosterone about 4 years ago almost in July. But at the time, I was really self-conscious about myself because I felt like I had to prove myself more. So I would try to be more secret about it, I guess. Because like I didn't want people to know I was trans. I didn't want them to know I was really queer at some places even. But then some stuff happened, and since then I've decided there's one really long life. Like, I mean, people say like life is really short. I say it's really long, and since it's really long, I'm going to just be myself the whole time. And since then, I've been much happier. But yeah, I tend to just, the moment I walk into a room, everyone just kind of assumes I'm just queer anyways. So it just works out at this point, so.
Okay, cool. So I'm not surprised completely that it's so diverse, so many different experiences, and you're probably not either, huh? Some of you touched on this, but I want to go a little deeper. How has your visibility changed over time? Like maybe over the past year, or since the beginning of your career to now, especially professionally? Yeah.
I'm not starting again.
Yeah, so I'll just say the same thing that I said earlier, but in different words. It's much easier to be visible now than it used to be. Like it was a much bigger deal in the past. Now it isn't. That's all I can say.
I can remark on just one thing, one aspect of it. I would say back maybe even, I guess when I started my career, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would kind of have to find a way to work in things to kind of talk about my own personal interests and like the queer part of my personality. But these days, I don't really find that to be true because, you know, you've got everybody talking about things like RuPaul's Drag Race and like that's just like things that people watch on like Thursday night, and then people are talking about it on Friday. You know, that stuff that I used to think was exclusively like for myself and my friends, but now it's out in the workplace. So I mean that's very rapid change. That's only like the last 5 years.
I'm acknowledging.
All right, my next question is, some of you touched on this too. This is always going to happen. Think about your last job interview or memorable job interview. Did you come out during that, before that, after that? Like, what was your thought process? Did you try to hide it? Did you reveal it? Like, whew, this is touchy, right?
Oh, I can see that right. So I actually had an interview just yesterday where I basically did out myself immediately. Also, I'm wearing my QueerCon shirt, which also doesn't help me. But yeah, essentially, part of my experience, I guess, is like this competition I've been doing like the last few years. It's like QueerCon hosts like a queer contest every single year, essentially. And so I was explaining like one of them, and they're like, "Oh, where is that from?" I was like, "QueerCon," and that just like automatically outed me. But at the same time, if a place isn't going to accept me, I really don't want to work there at this point. And I feel like there's more choices nowadays. Except I did learn the hard way. Some places in this area don't like queer people, so there's also that too. So.
Yeah, so there was like about 10 years ago, I went for a job interview, and I reached there a few minutes early or something. So of the 3 interviewers, the only one was there, and we were waiting for the other 2 to show up. So he asked me, like we did some small talk, and he asked me if I have family here in the DC area. So I had not planned on coming out, but then and there I told him that no, I was gay and I was single. Or maybe I had a boyfriend at that time, and I told him that. Yeah, I don't remember exactly. Yeah, but so he smiled, and it all seemed good. And then later, yes, I did get the job, and I worked for that company for almost 10 years. It's the longest that I've worked for any company. And that person, like, he was my direct supervisor all the time. So things worked out really well. So I've heard that they say that you're not supposed to tell such things, and they're not supposed to ask and all that. So that might be great from a legal perspective, but in this case, at least, it worked out fine.
My way of asking about it is to ask about the community resources that they have, and I'm like, do you have like a women's, like how do you empower or mentor women? Is there organizations there? And then I'm like also like LGBTQ or diversity initiatives. So that's how I kind of snake that in. It's not challenging that it's becoming more in the forefront of culture. Queer Eye, what a great reboot.
Absolutely.
But it can be in the way of like, I'm trying to out myself, like I'm not just a really awesome ally. So I think sometimes I'm like, did I say enough? Or did I like put myself out there enough? Because I very much echo the sentiment of, I do not want to work for you if it's not something that you would want to hear in an interview.
Absolutely. Well, I was actually going to hand it off to Casey, but since you forced my hand. No. So I definitely agree that when you're going into your first interview, I think the first couple things you're thinking about really should be, how am I going to woo this particular interviewer to give me this job that I'm applying for, right? Like, what are the skills that they're looking for? What makes me unique, and what's going to make me stand out? I actually had an interview internally about a couple weeks ago for another opportunity, and it was to go abroad. It was to go to a foreign country. I will not say the country in particular, but the guy was asking me after I had said my whole spiel, like, I'm a great web developer, I can do this, X, and Y. He was like, what do you do for fun? And I was like, I sing with the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. And at that point, see, the thing is, in my mind, that wasn't the first or second or third or fourth or fifth thing that I wanted to say, but it was just the thing that just blurted out. And immediately he was like, are you a baritone? Are you a tenor? So he was actually interested, but really it was beyond the fact that I had all these skills. That didn't matter to him. I think at that moment he wanted to know who I was authentically in that interview space. What was I beyond the resume? What was I beyond the fancy padded terms and things that we add in our sections about what we did for maybe 6 months or something like that? And I know I do that. So I think that's one good thing to keep in mind is when you're interviewing, it might be tough to just automatically think that, hey, I should probably bring my queerness out in this conversation. It might make it awkward. Don't worry. If it makes it awkward, that's not the company you want to work for. If it doesn't make you feel awkward, that's the company you want to work for. I can just walk. I can walk it over to you. That's fine.
This is dramatic, I like it. All right, my next question. We might not get that much deeper into this, that's fine, that's fine. I can tell an anecdote. I don't talk about me much, can I? Thank you.
Hi, Macy.
At my company, we have an affinity group that's like the big organization thing for queer people, technically. But I've never met anyone from it, especially because I work remotely, and I don't think there are any local events, so like that one doesn't count. Recently, we have a Slack room called Queer Kai, and now I can see some other people in the company are queer. I had no idea. You can't tell from just Slack who is and isn't queer. It's nice. I don't know. It's kind of just relaxing that I know who is or isn't in this way, and it's nice. So I wonder if you've experienced anything like that at your jobs, current or previous, like spaces, or if you would you dare start this if you don't have it?
So I'm in like a billion different Slack channels like everyone else is. But one of my favorite things to do is actually create like the queer+trans channel. And it's like super awesome just having everyone just like suddenly join you. Like, oh wow, they're also, this is awesome. And it's just, I would recommend doing it if you feel comfortable doing it. Even as an ally, I recommend it. I think it just brings out a more relaxed feeling afterwards once people are over the initial, ooh, this is gonna out me like a really bad way, but I think it creates a better environment, so.
You talked about it.
All right, I can just say one more thing. So if I were to ever go to an interview again, I'm pretty sure like they would already know that I'm gay, because the combination of my first name and last name, which is Ninad Jog, that is rare enough that there are not too many people in tech with that first name and last name. So all they have to do is like Google that and they'll find out. So, yeah.
Very cool. Next, I'm gonna ask one of the audience questions that we had earlier. We covered some, I know. But, next question. Of course, I'm blank. Excuse me. I have a lot of notes here. Oh yeah. How can I be a better ally? Whether you're queer or not, how can you support other queers at your company? Has someone ever said something inappropriate, a microaggression, something like that? What can an ally do if they want to support to make that better?
Yeah. So I guess I can answer both questions at once. I mean, have I ever encountered microaggressions? Sure. This is the most comfortable, open place I've ever worked.
Can we define microaggression?
Sure. Well, yeah.
You drew the straw on that one.
Oh yeah. I guess to me, a microaggression is something that somebody can say or do that isn't really appropriate or can offend you. But the thing about microaggression is that they may or may not even know that they've done it. I personally find the word microaggression pretty ironic because when I get microaggressed, it doesn't feel really micro at all. I mean, it pretty much covers like my whole day or week. Yeah, that okay?
Thank you.
All right. So, despite this being the most comfortable, open, friendly place I've worked, I still kind of had to encounter a microaggression. This was maybe like a year and a half ago, and I don't really remember the exact, what exactly was said, but we were all at lunch, and this guy was kind of, there was something on the television screen. This was before he got elected, and it was during the election cycle, and he said something about the gays. There was a "the" in front of it, so I already knew, and then it was something about, the increasing population. And at one point during his rant, my supervisor actually, who's married with kids, she's straight, and she actually kind of cut in and she was like, hey, why don't you just kind of a quit while you're ahead type of deal. But he didn't quit while he was ahead. And I just kind of got up and left, because I was like, I don't need to listen to this any longer. So let me stop there. If you want to be a better ally, pretty much for me, the primary thing you can do is speak up. It means not staying quiet. It means if you see something that you don't agree with, that's unjust, like that's the time that you say something. That you stand up on behalf of the person who is being offended. And basically what happened here was I complained about it. Well, she approached me and I was very truthful about how it affected me. And I think it probably got escalated a little bit, but the guy ended up apologizing, really tearfully actually. And because I don't think he even understood what exactly, the impact of his words was. Which is something to remember. I mean, even though microaggressions are really shitty, and they suck a lot to be the victim of one, the fact that sometimes they come from ignorance, like it's important to like be understanding as well, and educate, I guess.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so a form of microaggressions, and I've kind of struggled to even know if this is a microaggression, but something that's been weird since I've come out at work. I work in cyber, so that's tech and very niche, and it's all predominantly cis, straight, white men. And something interesting that happened when they find out that I'm gay is I get into this like bro circle where now it's okay to objectify women around me, because I don't know. Yeah, I'm like, that's an interesting position to put me in. Like, what part of me am I supposed to be defending right now? But it is challenging because they're just, and I understand, and kind of to that ignorance question, like, we can connect because our Venn diagram overlaps because we both like women. I'm like, okay, I get it, and I understand in a way where it's coming from, and in a way for them that's like accepting an identity and like being like, hey, I'm comfortable talking about your romantic life also. So it can be challenging, and for allyship, it's just again and again, just say stuff. Like, just be like, no, that was grossly inappropriate. I think there's some hesitation, I'm only gonna speak for myself, where calling out a microaggression burdens the recipient of said microaggression. And I think you really do have to be mindful and thoughtful of like, okay, am I in a massive conference with like 60 of our senior leadership? Like, do I wanna single this person out right now? Is it casual water cooler talk that it's maybe more comfortable to call them out? But I do think public call-outs are effective, and I think people who have multiple marginalized identities, we can be used to the microaggressions, and we, sometimes it's okay, I think, that we have to be a part of finding the solution as well. But if you really do encounter a situation where it's like consistently talk to the person, the recipient, ask them kind of how they would like things to be handled when it's a group setting. But definitely doing nothing is probably what I would say is, in my experience, the least effective tool.
So I think I can only speak sort of in broad concepts and broad strokes. For allies who actually want to get a better sense of, well, what do you say in that environment or in that situation, right? What are the better suited methods of engaging in a sensitive topic that might affect queer people, whether it be queer people of color, cis, white, queer people, transgender, what have you. I think it's best to sort of invite them into a conversation or into multiple conversations, right? You can't necessarily send out an ally to be an ally without some tools to help them be an ally, right? Allies don't know from the get-go what is the proper term to use when someone identifies as non-gender binary. They don't know. How do you tell an ally to address a situation where a straight male colleague is offending a cis male colleague or a cis female colleague or a LGBT female or male colleague, right? You invite them into a conversation that might be led by an LGBT person or by another ally who has had exposure and experience in the field. At least I can tell you in one example, Globe has been making significant strides to expand beyond the sort of typical, what you eloquently put, the typical outreach to the LGBT population of our company, which is, yes, unfortunately, cis, white, gay men. In that we have, in fact, appointed to our board a specific position for transgender employees. We have made a committed investment to supporting Capital Trans Pride, now going on its third year of commitment. In that respect, we have used those two vehicles to invite folks who might not have traditionally attended events allies-wise, because they didn't know about it or they didn't know how to engage, and said, this is what we're doing, we are now educated in this space, let us tell you about it. Let us tell you what you can do to support this particular community. Let us tell you what you can do to help trans people within our company, or even external to our company. You have to give people the tools, I think, to help you. What is that phrase? Help them to help you, or help you to help themselves. I'm really bad at quotes from Google. I'm really bad at them. But if you are in a small organization, big organization, nonprofit organization, what have you, and you see or know of allies in your group that you think, hey, they don't know enough about my community, reach out and talk to them. The only thing that can happen is you have a great conversation about whatever topic it is you want to reach out.
I actually want to bring up something for people who are queer or trans. Survivorship bias is actually pretty significantly an issue. For example, in the trans community, there are certain words that we have moved away from, but a lot of people still strongly identify with those words and terms. And so I want to bring up something that just because you know one person doesn't mean that person's completely accurate with like everything, right? They're not the sole source of like everything about that subject, right? So I recommend, even if you hear something, look it up on Google afterwards, ask other folks around. It's much better to have a broader like aspect of like looking at everything, because a lot of stuff will be outdated most likely even online. So try to get as many like different opportunities to like ask people privately, of course. Like for myself, for as an example, at this point in my life, I guess, I don't mind as much when I am like misgendered, but I recognize for a lot of other people that's not an option that will ruin their entire day or week or month or worse. I also have friends who will like correct my like pronouns for someone once I leave, because I'm not really comfortable like putting them on the spot, because I don't like the whole apology thing. If you do mess up someone's pronouns, for example, don't go off on like a I'm sorry, like nonstop thing. That's really awkward. It's okay, just fix them and maybe later be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. It's like totally okay. But I just wanted to bring up survivorship bias is really strong, and not everyone can handle the questions, or some people are just more out about it, and that's probably the best time to ask those folks instead. So.
All right, I want to do a poll. If you were to work with a trans person, would you know how to refer to them to other people who want to know that they're trans? Like, would you feel comfortable describing that to someone else? Raise your hand. Yeah, how do I say that better? There's a lot of terms to describe trans people, and I feel like it's hard to choose the right one because there are so many. There are some that are more preferred now than they were before, and the specific person could prefer some pronouns or some description of themselves. And I think the best way to find out is to ask the person first. That's my favorite one. You agree?
Yeah.
And short of that, if you are up to date, what would the most modern references be?
Yeah. So just to be intersectional, right? So for example, for a really long while, like even on Reddit, like there's still like unfortunately the most biggest subreddits for this, but like MTF and FTM, we're starting to move away from those terms because that infers that your gender is strictly to your sex, right? And that you want to go from one to the other, which doesn't really exist, because technically we're all kind of on a weird spectrum, right? Like even before I transitioned and realized I was trans, I already had hormone deficiency issues. So I was already in a weird spot that way. But from that, we've actually gone to like assigned female at birth, or assigned male at birth, or assigned intersex at birth. So that those are more inclusive ways to at least signify by sex, at least some type of idea. But everyone's somewhere on like a different like area, right? Like you don't know for a fact what your chromosomes are, where your hormone levels. Like everyone's somewhere different. So you can't really specify where you're coming from, and it should not signify what your gender or how you present is. Like I do present more feminine some days than others, and that doesn't change who I am. So.
Can you define the acronyms that you just said?
Oh yeah, so MTF and FTM, and at least in the past, and still in use by a lot of the trans communities still actually. MTF is for male to female, and FTM is for female to male. But that once again signifies that your body has to be a full transitional state of change, and that's not usually the case. Some people only transition socially, some people do socially and physically, some people might never come out at all. People are usually like, they might just be walking around, you'll never know because they never choose to like tell anyone they're trans, and that's totally okay too. And it's just whatever happens in the bedroom is what happens, and then that's it. Yeah.
Does that help some? Cool, thank you. My next question, I want to go back to booze celebrating queerness a lot. It feels a little corporate. I've heard some criticisms of, not of booze specifically, but like Gay Pride Parade is run by corporations. What do you think about that?
Are you asking us?
I don't know.
I can.
Or if your company does it, this is interesting.
Yeah. So I'm not on the board at Globe. I am not particularly involved. I, for no reason other than my communities that I formed based on my queerness, just happen to be external to my job. I try to go to events and meet people, and they tend to be the most fun events. So it's like that. There's been like the HRC gold standards, and it's become this PR play, and it's been used as kind of a recruiting ploy, and it can be really challenging to feel exploited, while at the same time really wanting more diversity in your workplace, right? So it's kind of this double-edged sword in terms of like, I want visibility. I want people with different backgrounds to feel comfortable at my place of work because it will make me feel more comfortable at my place of work. And it'll make us better at our jobs, and it'll make everything that we do better. I find it particularly powerful when we move into some of the really, in the federal spaces where we do a lot of our work. Sometimes we are the only queer folks in that space, and I don't know that I would have felt comfortable working for that particular agency because of, lots of stuff that's going on, current administrations, X, Y, and Z. So I think that it is so important to engage with your companies and be part of those dialogues and to kind of understand and just be engaged with the honest, there is economic things to be gained by being having rainbows everywhere. And corporate sponsorship. For whatever reason, it's hot right now. And so how can you then use that to actually get the ends that you want, which is a space that is empowering and celebrates all types of people for the right reasons. But there's not a perfect answer. I mean, it's not a perfect answer, and it can be frustrating, but it's still, I think we still have those tough conversations, and they're still at the forefront, and I appreciate that, but it's, yeah.
So, I don't worry, I'm not going to be an advocate for corporate America right now. I'm speaking as an individual person. In broad strokes, again, a lot of companies are asking this very same question, right, of their ERGs. How can we participate and engage in events like Capitol Pride, right, or any of the many, many minority prides, whether it be Black Pride, Latinx Pride, Trans Pride, and not make it too corporate? One thing that I always like to tell folks is that ERGs that help organize any company's president employee resource group, they're run by the employees, right? It's oftentimes not run by a senior director X or a vice president Y or a CEO Z. It's run by, little Joe Schmo me, and some other colleagues of a similar or maybe one level higher who are just committed to the idea of making sure that the space that they're in, the space that they're working in from 9 to 5 is inclusive, and organizations and folks outside of the company know that as well. We faced this question during the last Capitol Pride season, right? When No Justice, No Pride was organizing and especially blocking some of the parade route. And, again, we understood what the argument was about. We understood why they were committing to this particular demonstration, and we had no problem with it. But one thing that we just want to, at least personally for me, remind folks is that if you are in a company with an ERG, employee resource group, or you are interested in joining a company that does have a public partnership with HRC or Pride, and does have that HRC 100% rating that they sometimes do over corporatize, I will agree with you there. Just know that it's folks like us that put it together. And most of the time it's not for a nefarious purpose. It is really just to give folks an opportunity that they otherwise would not have, which is to be out, which is to be proud, and which is to demonstrate it through the company of their particular choosing.
So I want to bring up someone, actually, she just passed away like last year or so, but her name was Becky Bass, and if you know like IDSs, right, intrusion detection systems, you'll probably, hopefully know her. But she said something really strong that I just can't forget. I can't remember a word right now, but just to paraphrase, essentially, she was like, you know, like the only woman like of color going to like this school, right, for computer science and stuff like that, and she was definitely like the diversity token. And she said at that point, she just took it because it gave her a chance and she could at least prove herself afterwards. And I feel like that's a really strong thing to remember. So I'm really torn about pride and stuff like that because of that. Because I feel like at least, even if it's part of like this weird environment of where it feels really artificial at times, at the same time it allows you to like find other people who are just like you, and then you can spring off from there and go to more grassroots options, I guess. But yeah, I was kind of torn because I was in no parade last year, so you know, gotta love dctech. Anyways, but yeah, I accidentally also went to a protest the day before by accident because I was already in DuPont Circle, and I just ended up in the circle while they were walking that way, and the police closed off, and I was like, oh, this is awkward. But yeah, so that's my experience with that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised we all have mixed feelings on this topic. That sounds about right. All right, how much time do we have? 5 minutes. Cool, thank you. I was been saving for the end if you have any resources you want to share. Oh, I have one. Can I go? I don't talk about it. There's a queer tech Slack. Did you know about that? Raise your hand if you're in it. Not many people know it, it's true. There's a DC room in it also, like a local room, each major city has it. And there's a lot of traffic there actually. If there's anywhere that there's like a queer Slack room for DC, that's the one I know of. DC Tech Slack also exists, but we don't have a queer room. We could, should we? Somebody make it, I dare you. Alright, that's it. We'll post links to those. I'll put them in the meetup in a comment later.
Slack also for allies? Or...
Oh. LGBTQ Slack, I don't remember. I don't get the impression there are allies there. The website definitely says which way it is, but if it applied to me, I could get in. That's all I know.
Sweet. Alright, so I've been in this group called QueerCon since I was in high school, actually. It's a national group. If you're more in like the security, hacker, and FOSS communities, or just programmers, there's also someone who does ice skating in there, and they're really awesome. But it's a really strong group to join. I highly recommend it. It's typically held in like conferences like DEF CON, ShmooCon, and stuff like that in this area. I think we're getting more involved, hopefully, besides CC, which would be awesome. But QueerCon Locals is starting, and I'm part of the co-lead for that. So they're gonna be more smaller events because it's mostly like getting to like be more of a stronger community together. The New York City chapter is really strong in that one. But yeah, so hopefully they'll be starting soon, and we're really awesome. It's on Facebook and Twitter, so I'm wearing a hoodie right now. So.
What resources do we have? You have to come to our company for us to tell you about it.
Cool. Do anyone in the audience, do you have a resource you want to share? Queer community stuff?
Oh, capital Q.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to say?
Okay.
We're both in.
Yeah, so Capital Q meets monthly. Casey and myself, I think a few other, I think you were in a...
I was in a previous
yeah.
iteration, yes.
Yeah, it's just kind of, we call it like a no-flex queer community where we meet monthly and do happy hours, and the point is to make friends, and it's co-ed, and much, I think, in my experience here in DC, kind of a more relaxed space to casually meet people. There's not much posturing. I haven't felt as concerned of am I queer enough or am I cool enough. So I think it's a great space, and we've got a couple events next week. Feel free to sync up with Casey or myself if you're interested. Are you wrapping up? Or are we going to take more questions? I was just going to say, I feel like we haven't talked much about tech and like why tech matters. And the one thing I just wanted to say is with the beauty and why I love tech and I love diversity in tech, because in my opinion, in the corporate whatever environment that we're in, it is as close to meritocracy as I think you can get in a lot of ways in terms of like it's your hands to keys a lot of the times, and you get to like really prove your worth and like prove how you can be a really important part of a team in a way that people can't, like, it's your git commit, right? People can't take credit for it. And I think there's real beauty in the tech community where we do really celebrate the entire stack, right? And I think there's a lot of analogy to draw there, and coming from an engineering school where I really got to explore being queer in college in a way that I think maybe was different than maybe like the liberal arts twist on it. I think there's a lot of beauty in creativity and personalities in tech, where like the first thing I want to ask you is like, so what languages do you feel most comfortable in? I think there's this really cool environment where we can connect in so many different ways, be it cryptography, be it like, you know, what are our hobby projects? And I think there's such a, in my experience, in my opinion, a perfect kind of confluence point for like queerness and this ability to really push communities and ideas and create these sites and Slack channels and all of these resources to really connect everyone. So tech also.
I was actually going to add, so I don't know, how many of you guys actually went to college for a computer science degree or anything like that? Show of hands.
Sorry.
Okay, don't worry.
Less than half.
I did not. I went to a small liberal arts school, got a degree in international relations, and thought that was going to give me a community of very wonderful, bright-minded folks. And it did, but it was very competitive. Right? Everyone wanted to prove that, oh, I know more about countries than you do, or I know more about languages than you do. And I was like, I just want to be your friend. So this is great. But what I realized, though, when I switched into tech, full-on, career-wise, you meet some of the most unique and most interesting people, but their personalities are really what drive that uniqueness and that interest. Because they're always willing to help you. They're always willing to answer. Casey, so I've known Casey for a good while now, and Casey dares me to do things. It's like, so if I wanted to learn, let's say, a new coding language, I dare you to learn this coding language. Or I want to learn how to build a web page, I'm going to dare you to build that web page.
I'm very specific about it.
Very specific, very specific.
Actionable.
But I say that, generally speaking, that I've seen that in the tech world, whether you're going to a coffee meetup or you're coming to a discussion like this, it's a lot more open, right? It's not so stuffy. You don't feel like I need to impress the person next to me. I can just talk about anything that, in my mind, is interesting in the world of tech or outside the world of tech. You don't have to show that you're smarter than the other person, or you don't have to feel like you have to do that. I've seen that in the tech world, there's a lot more openness to have conversations that are frank, that are fun, that are interesting, that are somewhat enlightening. I doubt that I would have met an equally interesting panel of bright-minded, wonderfully queer individuals had I stuck to international relations. No dig on international relations, folks. No dig on IR, folks. You know, it's great, but no, it's that openness that I've come to cherish and appreciate, especially within the tech world.
I just want to say that, like, for me, right now at conferences, I tend to teach a lot of younger kids, and, like, at one conference, like, a few conferences, I've been, like younger kids who are, like, coming out as queer or trans have been coming up to me, and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, I'm actually, like, potentially part of, like, their life, right, if I teach them this, and I feel like giving them, like, the tools and the power to understand things from the beginning to the end, I feel like there's kind of, like, a weird issue where, like, people will be like, oh, just go on and Google it, but, like, they don't know what to Google yet, right? So I feel like the moment you teach someone like the very basics of like even how to Google and how to find something they're looking for, it's just super rewarding. And just seeing someone else who's also queer and excelling what they do afterwards, it just makes my heart so happy to like hear that their parent later being like, oh, my kid just taught their class like how to do this thing that you taught them, and now they're doing other stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and it just feels really good to see queer excellence like that. So.
I think we're getting short on time. Yeah?
We have time for a couple of audience questions.
I love audience questions. Do you have any more questions for us? Did we miss any that you asked earlier? I think we touched on most.
We didn't touch on the HR reporting if anyone has.
Oh, any HR stories?
Yeah, let's do it very fast. So I worked at the airlines, and airlines are very binary, turns out. And so I had the unfortunate experience. I was actually very in the closet as a trans person. I mean, people knew I was queer pretty fast. My hair wasn't blue at the time. But they were... So basically at Chicago O'Hare, if everyone knows, the lines are pretty kind of crazy, right? And this is like my first time really flying out as like an employee. And I didn't go into employee line, which I should have. So after like half an hour waiting in line, I got to like the very front, which is pretty short in Chicago, don't get me wrong. But then I went through the scanner, and then they saw I had yellow boxes all over, right? And then they were like, oh no. And then I tried to explain I was queer, and none of my coworkers knew I was queer at the time. Oh god. And so basically the Chicago police shut down my lane, started, like everyone came up to me and started patting me down like crazy, didn't matter. They stopped refusing to like, oh yeah, also my coworkers are like going through my bags also, which is great, to find my stuff, which is not allowed by the way, to like find my paperwork to describe I am working at the airlines, yes. But after that, people started purposely misgendering me, because up until then I was passing is another word for a trans person who doesn't want to be known as being trans. I have very strong feelings about that word now, but at the time I wanted to not be visibly queer and trans. But people started purposely misgendering me after that. Like, they started using different pronouns that were clearly not the ones I preferred. And that was just like a really unfortunate experience. And eventually, I mean, people had to get involved, managers were involved, and stuff like that. It wasn't ever fully resolved, but I feel like, oh yeah, there's also like the pressure of being queer and trans, right? And if you're like the only one, you feel like you have to be better than everyone else, right? Otherwise, you're kind of like letting everyone down. But I did manage to gain people's respect for the most part. Some people are still just very hardcore. No, we don't care because you're LGBTQ. But yeah, I definitely recommend talking to people about what's happening, because turns out when you don't do that, everyone kind of finds out in one big blurb. So.
I don't have any stories either. No HR. That's good, I think.
Yes. I have a queer tech question. So there's a story out there about like how you look at marriages in the database, and how the story just goes on this huge tangent about how you can't look at it as a binary anymore because there's so many different variables. Are there any other stories or problems in the tech space that you feel are easier to understand, or maybe have a unique way of understanding because of your queerness?
Yeah, I've done some principal component analysis in a previous job where you have to take a bunch of basically qualitative factors and try to create a quantitative kind of metric. It was for educational grants, but I think it like predisposes you, right, to be like, well, I'm gonna reject kind of any of these weird, be it a Boolean, right, be it like true false, or be it like 1 to 6, right? It can be people really, I think, who maybe haven't, I love the question, because it's like people who haven't necessarily been so challenged every day, every minute with kind of working against a black and white or a status quo, right? I think maybe are easier to like fall into, well, most everybody fits, so I'm not gonna interrogate this edge case. And I think that, I don't know that I've put words to it or thought about it in a literal way of like, well, yeah, I guess people who by nature are challenging status quo or challenging norms, maybe like, yeah, more able to find that one breaking edge case that everybody missed, because they're like, well, maybe if you spin it this way, or you look at it this way, or if we, you know, increase the resolution, etc. So I think that's cool.
Trying to put it in programming terms, we like to think in floats, not booleans. Like the more spectrum. I like that.